Okay, a warm welcome, beautiful afternoon back here at Sadok Crown Court. We are in week number 8 of this lengthy marathon trial of bribery trial of former Minister of Petroleum, Diezani and her brother Doye Agama and defendant number 3 Olatimbo Ayinde to kick things off. The prosecution closed their case on Friday, and let me just bring out what the judge said after they closed their case in sending the jurors home to say they are not required. Okay, just a bit here. So the prosecution finished their case on Friday, as mentioned, and the judge said to the jurors, you're not required on Monday and Tuesday. There's a matter of the law. So even though there's no sitting today, there is a matter of the law which is being considered inside this court behind me. But the jurors are not back until Wednesday. So when we get back to court on Wednesday, though there's a sitting as well tomorrow, jurors are not back until Wednesday. We are under restriction to not talk when the jurors are not there, right? So tomorrow there is going to be, it's not an open court, as the judge said while dismissing the jury on Friday. There's a matter, these are exact words, you are not required on Monday and Tuesday. There's a matter of the law to be considered. We see you on Wednesday, so we are not required. We cannot say anything when the jury is not in court. So there is point of law, matter of the law being considered as I speak this afternoon, and tomorrow there's also matter of the law to be considered, but this is not an open court, so it's not going to be an open court tomorrow as well. The jury will be back on Wednesday, but on Friday, let me give you part of the things which happened. There was a drama just before the prosecution closed their case. I'd stepped out of court, but I was told by one of those in court that Olatimbo Ayinde broke down in tears. She was in tears profusely, and it even took one of our legal team to console her. She was in tears right there in the dock, and this is what happened. What happened was that before, under cross-examination, the investigating officer, who had been in the witness box for quite a couple of days, when he was being cross-examined, it happened that on the 3rd of January 22nd in 2018, the NCA, the police, they interviewed Jumebi Kachiku. Just to refresh our mind, remember, Jumebi Kachiku was the one who requested for ₦1 billion in that taped conversation between him and Olatimbo, which is part of what the prosecution that dragged this case to court. So meanwhile, Olatimbo was recording every transaction, everything, after notifying then APC chieftain Bola Ahmed Tinubu, now the president, of that demand, and remember, Olatimbo said that this was part of a grand plan by our powerful ex, Mr. Femi Otedola. Of course, his name was still ringing, still has his name all over this case. But what led to Olatimbo's breakdown was that when Jimobi was invited for interview on January 22nd of 2018, the NCA officer, the National Crime Officer, who was in the witness box on Friday, who interviewed Jimobi, handed over, on the 2nd of January, in January of 2016, among the documents that were presented, used both by the Crown, is a letter which the Olatimbo had written to the then president, the late Mohamed Buhari. So that letter where she detailed the harassment, the sexual, intimidation, and what she referred to as the corruption in the oil industry, the complaint she had against Jumobi Kachiku, how he had requested for 1 billion naira or $5 million. Those things which she wrote in a memoir, private and confidential, and which she gave to a copy to President Buhari, that letter, which contained the names of Jumobi and his brother, Dr. Emmanuel Kachiku, the NCA officer, the National Crime Agency officer who interviewed Jumobi on January of 22nd of 2018 here in London, he handed that letter. He handed that letter to divulge what was in that letter to Jumobi. So during the cross-examination, it went on the cross-examination, like I said, before the Crown came back to do re-examination. In the morning session of Friday was cross-examination by Anyede's barrister, which started on Thursday. So the defense for Olatimbo was asking the investigative officer, so you wanted to interview a suspect. And then you divulge what the witness, who should have a protection, somebody who is a whistleblower, somebody who is being treated by the EFCC as a witness, somebody who is reporting corruption to our MP, corruption in a foreign land and also in Nigeria, who had reported it to the president. You are now divulging everything, a letter she had written to make this complaint. You are now handing it over to the suspect. And he asked, among the questions he asked towards the end was that, don't you think you are endangering the life of the witness or of the informant? Could that have happened here in the UK if somebody has gone to report me? This is just the scenario. Somebody has come to report me to the police, and then that I was a dangerous person, I was demanding money, just using myself as example, and then the police, now the NCA, now wanting to interview the person who had reported me, and then the police now mentioning the name of the informant to me to say, look, so and so reported you, this is what they said about you. And the defense and they said, look, could this have happened in the UK if somebody had gone to report, a dangerous person or somebody, who was asking for bribe? Could that have happened? Of course, the NCA officer who was in the box said this could not have happened in the UK. When somebody goes to report, make an allegation, imagine somebody who has come to the Prime Minister, who has reported the case to the Prime Minister, and then the police wanting to interview that suspect, now giving the letter that had been written to the Prime Minister to the suspect. That is what it looked like. So when the defense for Anyede asked, do you think at the end, don't you think you are endangering the life of Olatimbo Anyede? I mean, it was uncomfortable sitting right there in the witness box for the officer because he was ruffled. Though later he felt better when there was cross-examination, but it's what really made Olatimbo to break down in tears was that at a point the defense asked the investigative officer, "Don't you think you are putting our life in danger?" The investigative officer replied and said, "I don't care." Which somebody had said who witnessed the thing and said, "Look, this sort of person should be fired." He said, "I don't care." So that was what got to Olatimbo at the end when the session closed for tea break in the morning of Friday, that she was in tears to say, "Look, that means this policeman, this investigative officer with the National Crime Agency put my life in danger. The letter I wrote about him the letter I wrote about Jimabi and his brother and Mr. Femi Otedola and the things which was happening in the oil industry, which I wrote confidentially to President Muhammad Buhari, was now being divulge, now seeing what I said about people and what I said about him." So saying "I don't care" made Olatimbo to break down in the dock. Of course, the judge had taken her exit by then, had hurried out of court, but she was in tears. It was a defense that consoled her. But beyond that also, so there was a lot of cross-examination that to show that the defense was trying to prove their case under this cross-examination that the NCA did not do a thorough job, that are also exposing a weakness. Somebody who was an informant, exposing, not providing cover, not providing protection for them. And the hallmark of it was that question when the defense asked the investigative officer, "Don't you think by handing over this letter of complaint, this whistleblowing, by handing it over to the person being reported, don't you think you are endangering the life of Mr. Ayinde?" And he said, "I don't care." So that was how it panned out on Friday. There was a lot of questions under the cross-examination asking what job, what effort did the NCA make to get assistance from Nigeria. They provided a lot of documents. When the Crown Prosecutor came back to do cross-examination, the National Crime Agency, the officer felt better, and then there was a second witness also in the box, also from the NCA. They felt better then because it showed the paper trail that they made some requests to Nigeria, to the office of the Vice President. Then, that's the Vice President, Professor Osinbajo, and also the Attorney General, asking for some what is called International Letter of Request, ILO schedule, where they were asking for some document which they had on Jumebi, but the letters were not forthcoming. So that was how it panned out. But the barrister for Ayinde showed that the NCA, they didn't do a thorough job, and to add insult upon injury for a witness, handing over the letter that the Ayinde wrote to President Buhari, handing that letter over to Jimabi during his interview here on January 22, 2018, was really seen that very unprofessional. And beyond that also, that somebody who was being harassed, that you could not have done that here in the UK. If somebody was shopping people who were demanding for bribe, who were harassing her, you could not have handed the letter that they wrote to their MP, just to also draw a parallel, like I said, Olatimbo also wrote her MP. Detailing that title of that letter was sexual harassment and intimidation from a powerful ex. So imagine a police officer here wanting, during that interview, handing over that letter to Jimabi and showing that it was so person that reported you. So that was how it went on Friday. And like I said, the Crown closed their case on Friday. But before we left court, the judge told the jurors, I read that statement again, members of the jury, that's all the evidence will be taken today. You are not required on Monday and Tuesday. There is a matter of law to be considered. We'll see you on Wednesday. So there is no open court until Wednesday, but the lawyers are talking. Tomorrow also, there is no open court until Wednesday, but I'll be here tomorrow. The lawyers will be here. They're still considering point of law, but the jurors are not required. And whatsoever, when the jurors are not there, we are not allowed to say what is being discussed in their absence. So even though I know what is happening in court and what is going to happen tomorrow, but we are not, we are restricted. There is restriction when the jurors are not on seat, not to report what is being said in their absence. So on Wednesday, I'll see you on Wednesday. I may see you tomorrow because tomorrow the lawyers will be here as well. But like I said, even though I know what will be discussed tomorrow, we are not allowed to report it. So, but I'll give you updates tomorrow. And then, of course, Wednesday, the defense will formally open their own case. This is week number 8. This case is this trial is supposed to last until late April. Okay, so week number 8, week end of week 7, prosecution closed their case. Week number 8, defense should formally start on Wednesday. So, but I'll give you an update tomorrow and Wednesday when the defense officially starts their own side of the argument. Thank you. I'll see you then.